All right. So welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed your conversations in the breakout rooms. Very excited today to have with us Dr. Lily Su from Labouré College. She is our featured speaker for today's Women in Local Leadership series. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and thank our sponsors for this year. Enbridge, George Washington Tillman TV and Appliance, Hollywood Agency, who you'll hear from a little bit later, Mass General Brigham, Mountain One Bank, Partnering for Performance, and Steinberg HR. Each session of the Women in Local Leadership series will have a little feature on a sponsor. So today I've asked Darlene Hollywood to join us and tell us a little bit about Hollywood Agency. And then once Darlene has wrapped up, I will go ahead and introduce Renee and Dr. Su. So Darlene, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I think that I was either the first or the second speaker in this series. So it's been near and dear to me. I've been able to participate in a number as a listener and just have enjoyed being involved with the organization. Thank you for, again, the opportunity. I'm the principal of Hollywood Agency. We're an integrated marketing communications firm located in the beautiful Hingham Shipyard. I am proud to be able to represent a number of local clients, a couple of which are on this call. NVNA and Hospice has been a client of ours, I think, for about 8 years. Wonderful organization, and again, one that I'm proud to represent. I just learned that Marianne is now part of Side by Side Pet, which is also a client of ours. And for those organizations, we do different things. For Renee, we're working across the board on social media, public relations, thought leadership. For Marianne specifically, for Side by Side, we're doing some package design. So outside of working with a number of great local organizations, we also represent a number of multinational companies like Stanley Black & Decker and Fusion Worldwide, both on the B2B and B2C side. And again, just happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Darlene. All right, so let's get started. Today we are joined by Dr. Lily Su, president of Labouré College, and Renee McInnes, who is the president of NVNA and Hospice, CEO of NVNA and Hospice, and also the immediate past chair for the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. So very excited to have both of you here with us today. I'm going to go ahead and do a brief bio for each of them. And then I'm just going to hand the floor over to Renee, and Renee's going to help us have a moderated conversation. We will open it up to Q&A at the end. And at that time, I just ask that everyone try to use the raise hand function, and I'll be happy to call on you to ask your questions. So here we go. Renee has served as a CEO of NVNA and Hospice since July of 2016. Renee has over 30 years of clinical and management experience in home care and acute care settings. Her 10 years at NVNA and Hospice have included Vice President of Business Development, Director of Admissions and Marketing, Nurse Case Manager, and Alzheimer's Specialty Team Leader. Renee also launched and directed NVNA Works, providing private duty care to the community. So she's basically done all the things in NVNA and Hospice and has learned all the ins and outs, and is now been there CEO since 2016. She has also served on the executive committee of the board of directors for the South Shore Chamber of Commerce since 2016 as well. So that's and then we are also joined by our featured speaker, Dr. Lily Su. She is the president of Labouré College of Healthcare in Milton, Massachusetts, right here on the South Shore. In this role, Dr. Su has combined her expertise in public health and healthcare programming with her passion for building educational pathways for underserved populations. Labouré College of Healthcare is increasing representation across the greater Boston healthcare workforce as the largest educator of registered nurses in Massachusetts, with a 62% racially and culturally diverse student population. Dr. Su served as provost at Johnson & Wales University and associate provost at Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences University. She holds a doctorate from Teachers College, Columbia University in Health and Behavioral Science, and a Master's of Science and Bachelor of Arts from Pennsylvania State University. She's actively involved in the community and serves on several boards, including a few hospital boards and some industry and education boards. She was recently elected to the South Shore Chamber Board, which we are very excited to have her engaged and involved. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Renee. Just thought it was important to give you a little background, and Renee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Great. Thanks so much. So Lily and I have got to know each other well and had many conversations. So I'd like all of you to hear from her about her journey and many other wonderful, fantastic things that she's doing as the president of Labouré College. So Lily, welcome, and thank you for allowing me to moderate this. So initially, why don't you give us your 1 to 2 minute sort of career journey? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey and what brought you to Labouré College.
Thanks, Renee, and thank you to the Chamber too. It's been a wonderful experience the last couple of years, getting to know the various members, the organization that this organization so much aligns with the values that I hold, both as an educator and as an executive in higher education. You know, when you think about the journey, one, it makes me realize how old I am, so I'm not sure that was a good thing. But yeah, I do want to share with you, because I think it's important, that I am the first generation in this country. My parents both immigrated to the US. My father was from mainland China and came over in the very late 40s with a scholarship that ended up for him at Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. So really he had no intention of coming, but he ended up with a free scholarship. So he decided to make the journey. My mother, on the other hand, is South Korean. She's from Seoul and was a physician in South Korea. She served during the Korean War with side by side with the US Army. And in fact, it was an Army surgeon who kind of, you know, like the MASH units that we, some of us can remember that show, that sponsored her to come to this country, and she ended up doing her residency in this. My parents both ended up in Baltimore, Maryland. My mother doing a residency at Baltimore City to earn her US license, and my father ended up at Hopkins doing his postdoc. Now, any of you who know some of the cultural history between those two Asian countries know that typically they clash. So the fact that my parents got married and had a very long and successful marriage with 4 children, coming from 2 different cultures that warred for centuries, and they didn't speak each other's language, is amazing that I'm even here. So it is the auspicious, I think, beginning that has laid down a lot for me in terms of where I am today. You know, that resiliency that I think individuals who come to a new country and or to a new part of the world, you know, they embrace what is around them. And so in that, for me, was a value that took me through my educational pathway. Unlike, I think, young children today who will look at and visit tons of institutions to try to make up my mind, I ended up by mistake at Penn State. But I am now a diehard Penn State Nittany Lion for sure. Really never went to a football game until I went there. So, but that institution opened up my eyes to a lot of possibilities and gave me kind of the sense of independence, because I had never, and this is true, I had never slept away from home until my mother dropped me off at the dorm. So it was a shock for me to realize, okay, now I got to do it. So I stayed, earned my bachelor's degree, stayed on and did a master's in nutrition education. I was the first class to graduate in that program to focus on education versus science, even though it's an MS degree, because during that studies, I realized that I wanted to be working with people, and the aspect of what education could do for others in terms of nutrition. And I think we all understand better now the value of that. The other I will tell you is that that led me on to working at the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts for 8 years as the Director of Chronic Disease Prevention, where I was able to bring forward that nutrition experience in terms of the work there. I went on then to go back to higher education because of the love I have for education, and went on to get my doctorate at Teachers College, which was very community health oriented, which fit directly into my desire to work with underserved populations. So I was really able to combine a very science background with education. And I feel right now at Labouré College of Healthcare, I am such in the right place to meet the things that most important to me, as well as the opportunity to help move individuals into the career pathways that they want to be. And we also know that healthcare is in desperate need right now, in all levels of healthcare, to help to address our community as a whole. So thanks, Renee. Renee's been somewhat of a guide and a mentor through this whole process at the South Shore, and I do have to give a big shout to thanks to Renee.
Well, thank you, Lily. Hopefully I guided you in the right direction.
I'm sure.
That was very impressive. I did not know that about you, your parents, but obviously look at your mentors. I mean, what they did, and especially your mom back in 1940, I mean, to become a physician was incredible. So, and to come to the States and finish that. So very impressive. And hence you, and I'm sure your other siblings as well. So let's just move a little bit into what do you think are your top 3 challenges from the past couple of years? Mind you, the pandemic didn't add any more work to your day, I'm sure, but.
You know, when I think about that question, Renee, like all of us, it's, what is that real estate saying about, it's location, location, location.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I kind of feel like the answer to this question for me has been COVID, COVID, COVID. It has impacted us in so many different ways,
Right.
As it has for every industry and business I can think of. Initially for us, it was the immediate concern of how do we keep our students, faculty, and staff safe, because there was so much unknown. And how do we, as well, at the same time, not only keeping them safe, but not to shut off our purpose and mission, which was to deliver health programs to students. We needed to keep them on track so they wouldn't lose time without also compromising quality. So that was the first challenge that we needed to do, and we needed to pivot quickly. The second, I think, that COVID taught us was, or has challenged us, is to think about how do you address the fatigue that came with it. There were huge, change takes energy, no matter what form it is. And so as we progressed through that first year of COVID, we, our anxiety about, fear didn't go away, but it did get moderated to such that we felt we were doing what we needed to do. But the energy, the intensity, the cost to all aspects of our lives created a huge energy drain. And we know that it occurred most in terms of individuals who were at entry-level positions, who had less education, and or individuals who were juggling family, work, and school. Not to mention children in the background who weren't going to school, but were now trying to learn and share the one maybe computer that was in the home. Incredible challenges that we had never thought of before. And so it was behooving us to say, what do we do to support our students first and take care of ourselves at the same time? I remember as a young mother that one of a nurse told me, once said to me, she said, you need to take care of yourself, because if you don't, the rest, who's going to take care of the rest of the family? So that has stuck with me, certainly in terms of what we experienced the last 2 years. The third piece I want to say that's a challenge, and that is, as we come out of this incredible 2 years, I think we also need to stop and think about, how did it change us, and what are, for lack of a better term, the silver linings? I think in my institution, we are learning that, remote learning can be done, and it can be done well. And particularly for my students, my students are average age of 34, with like 70% of them having children in school or younger. So their lives are very different than a traditional college student. And as all of us have learned to Zoom, we know that it may not be the ideal, but on the other hand, there are major advantages to it. And I think that that's something that we should not lose. I have told my staff and faculty, I said, the phrase was, well, we're going to return to normal. We have to define a new normal. So those are the three challenges, I think, of the past couple of years that really stick out for me.
Yeah, and Lily, I know you also had challenges, so trying to pivot and figure out, obviously with technology, but also where are these students, the nursing students in particular, going to have the clinical sites? Because there were so many clinical sites that were not accepting the students. So trying to figure out with sim labs and other ways to educate your team, your students, I'm sure was very challenging, because I know that was tough.
It was extremely tough. I mean, I think we felt squeezed by
Right.
regulatory bodies and healthcare institutions that were trying to keep their patients and staff safe,
Right.
by shutting the students out for clinicals, and then our obligation for the students. We do have a simulation center, which helps to support that hands-on skills for students.
Right.
During the pandemic, we invested in expanding that facility because of the need for students to get some clinical simulation experience.
Mm-hmm.
But we also added virtual reality. Now, those big funny headsets that people you see more and more. We purchased the virtual reality hardware and some of the software, which basically also provided simulation through those software scenarios. And I believe we were the first nursing program in the state to adopt it. One of the interesting findings we had from adopting that was, if anyone's been in a simulation center for nursing, yes, they are not real people in the beds, and we have infants through geriatric patients, so we're able to simulate the life cycle. But they allow students to get to practice, improve their tactical skills, if you will, the blood pressure, to put it in IV, as well as talk to the patient that will respond. It does have verbal skills that are controlled by a computer. And they're very helpful and have been demonstrated in the research to be successful for students. But the virtual reality added a different component, which we had not anticipated. And that is it helped to improve the communication skills of the student. So one was both focused on the more tactical hands-on, and the other helped to reinforce the communication skills for the students. Because as we know, so much is dependent on understanding the patient's needs, understanding the family's needs. When they talk about pediatrics as an example, it's not just the patient you're treating, it's the entire family that you're treating. And communication is key, and nurses, from our perspective, are the key individual in the healthcare team who really makes communication a foundation of how that treatment is going to happen. And when it's good communication, the outcome is always positive. I've never known a case where it hasn't. A startling statistic for us that I'd like to share is that it is estimated that every nurse during the lifetime of his or her career will touch 45,000 or more patients' lives. Including families, I should say, not just the patient. So the impact is huge for every individual who is out there in the healthcare. Now, what's happening today in healthcare is that we're expanding in terms of what that healthcare team is. And I think there's more recognition coming that's being recognized about different roles and how we best utilize the expertise of nurses alongside other technicians, other staff who can all become part of that integrated team for healthcare. So I think it's going to be exciting as we move forward.
And I love that, because I think it's so important to have that integrated team. It's really what it's about. And it maybe that was a little bit of the silver lining that occurred, because it's expedited somewhat. So for all of us probably on this call, we're all challenged with this. And thinking about the role of caregivers, parents, caring for children, caring for their parents. All of us have people in our workforce that work for us, and we're trying to support and help them. So what do you see? What are you doing at Labouré or in your industry, in the education industry? What are you hearing about how we can support and help employees cope with all these other external things that are happening in their lives?
I think that what we have tried to do at Labouré is recognizing who our students are. When we received CARES money from the federal government, we chose to utilize the funding, about 70% of it, to go directly to our students. And we packaged basically checks that we wrote, but we didn't, instead of saying this has to go to your tuition bill, which of course I think many on the board would have preferred, and maybe my CFO team would have preferred, but we felt that the real need was to allow the students to decide where they needed it the most. Because if it's about food, rent, getting a better internet connection so they can continue their studies, purchasing another computer so the kids have their own while I do my classes or work meetings, that all was going to contribute to, if you will, my need to have them stay enrolled and successfully complete their program. So trying to dictate to them how to use the money didn't feel like it was the right decision, because they're adults. Let's recognize that, and they have many responsibilities. So let's trust in them to use it in the best way possible. They've already indicated their commitment to nursing, to health professions, and to education by enrolling. So that's what we did. The government did require us to spend 50% of the funding on students, but we went ahead and did 70%. The monies that were left over went to the institutional category, and we used it to buy more like the simulation and virtual reality equipment to enhance the education on campus. And of course, like most healthcare institutions and businesses, it went to go for masks and PPE. So that's how we used a lot of that funding. So that was a thought process we went through. The other is that because we're a commuter campus, we don't have a health service division like most traditional larger institutions have. But recognizing that mental health was becoming a more prominent issue, COVID didn't take away the stigma around mental health, but it definitely increased the need. And so we invested in an online 24/7, offers 20 some different languages, counseling, and I would say not counseling so much as support. You know, I'm fortunate that I have a close group of friends and 2 sisters that I can call when I feel like at the end of the day, I just don't know what to do anymore. And I'm too exhausted, and I'm not, and I don't want to ever appear, you know, that I'm fragile. I mean, that's my own issue I have to deal with, but that, you know, I'm fortunate to have those supports. We knew some of our students don't have it, like my parents, who had no family in this country, who were the only 2 people they had to go to were themselves. So to each other. So recognizing that, we instituted this 24/7 company called Talk Campus, and having the different languages was very important. What we found is that students would use it a couple of times. They could use it up to 9 or 10 times, I think was the contract condition. Most of the issues did not go to the clinical level of depression, but it was anxiety. And I think we can all relate to that. Mm-hmm. That has been on the rise. That has been the issue for most of us and our students or staff in terms of the mental health concerns. Now, there were a very small number who probably went to the clinical stage that were then referred to licensed professionals to address that. But the majority of them felt that it was a way that it was a resource that they could use. The third thing that we tried to do was really utilize better on-campus groups. So we facilitated more support group, both as mentors. We brought on students as peers to support. I would say we were somewhat tricky in terms of saying, maybe I shouldn't, it's recorded, but to say that, you know, the purpose was, if I can get students in small groups because they're there to get help on a question they have from the latest lecture, to listen to their peers. We know in those small groups, and I know from my own personal experience, other things are going to come out, other concerns are going to come out. And so it was an opportunity for students to air those issues and learn from their peers of how to solve it, maybe with other resources, and or just to know somebody listened to me. And I think that was another critical piece. So we upped the monies and our resources were shifted to increase mentors, tutors that were both professional and peers to students.
That's great.
It's ongoing though, Renee, I'll tell you, it's not.
Yeah.
We're still looking for answers.
Well, it's so needed. But as you said, behavioral health, I mean, there's such a lack of clinicians to support. So that's a great service that you offered them, to be able to call, you know, anonymously and have someone talk to them, no judgment there. I think it's great. And then the peer support is so important. We witnessed that here as well in terms of, as you said, many of our staff as well, working moms with young children, and how do you juggle all of that while working? and homeschooling and, Zooming that everyone had to learn. So certainly a big challenge, but it sounds like you obviously did the right thing by supporting the students in the way that you did. I agree with you. And boards sometimes don't always make the right decisions. That's you can record that. Anyway, sometimes we have to say, hold it right there. Okay. So the next question, and I know you've done so much work with this, Lily, because you've actually helped me to understand more about what I could do within my organization. But the need for more diversity, equity, and inclusion across all industries has been elevated in many business leaders' minds over the past few years. So diversity, as we know, can mean a lot of different things. And tell us about how Labouré is tackling these tough issues, and what is the role of the educational institutions?
Well, certainly being a woman of color, it is very high on my list and with my students. And one of the things that I think is most important is that I'm a role model for them. I need to be visible for them because to be able to see someone who has reached a senior level position and can relate in some way to their experiences being new to this country. So it's one of the reasons I shared with you about my parents, because understanding where I come from for my students helps for them to relate to it. So it is, focusing on the inclusion part, recognizing there's diversity. So that's of the DEI thing. I like to think of it in that way. I don't have a problem in recruiting students who are diverse, as was shared in the introduction about Labouré. We have probably the largest diverse nursing student population in the state. We are looking to expand that diversity so that we have more countries and ethnic groups represented. So that is something that we are still working on. But the other things that we have done, for example, has been we certainly recognize that diversity is not matched in our faculty and staff. Many reasons for that. I think many of our organizations struggle with that. So one of the things is that with my director of HR, I asked her to think about where do we promote our positions so that we're sure that we're reaching audiences who are reading those publications. And in other words, going to the neighborhoods, if you will, where we're most likely to be seen. I think that's one. And so I want to see in my applicant pool, both at the first stage and then through the final stage, that we have a diverse pool of candidates. If we don't, I need to hear a really good reason why not. And in some cases, I've sent the search committee back and said, you need to go back and look. So it's not because I think people on the search committee in particular have done a poor job. It's just that I think we sometimes get complacent with what we've done before, and we are not aware of our biases. And we all have them, and sometimes it's hard to see them. So until we forced the issue, I felt like we were never going to move the needle in terms of our diversity on staff. And so that is another policy and procedure that we have instituted to help make that, to help move that diversity and inclusion. And I meet with every finalist that we hire, from the administrative assistant through the VP. Part of it is not that I'm going necessarily to go against any search committee's decision, but it's more, again, going back to getting acquainted and having them meet me, because the sense of community and sharing of who you are and where you come from is how we move toward the inclusion definition in my mind. None of this, I recognize, is going to happen overnight. But until we talk more about it, till we push and make things, I have to say, a little uncomfortable sometimes in groups, we're never going to get there. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that DEI is now on every board's agenda in one way or another. Opening and the awareness is the first step. The trick will be for us to help maintain that conversation and to make sure it moves to the next level. So, and I encourage all of the leaders here, all the members of the chamber, to think about how we make sure that we're inclusive in all shapes, in all ways, because we know there are gaps out there, and so I think we all have a responsibility for that.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Lily, because like you said, we're all in this geographic area in particular struggling with that. And I think, to your point, how are we recruiting? You know, how are we reaching out? But just using the traditional methods probably aren't going to work, you know, so how are we reaching out to different communities looking for leadership or in your, you know, professors for your organization?
The other thing I'd like to point out, and I you know, my communication director would be happy I did this, but one of the things we focused on was really improving our visibility campaign. And so a lot of print literature, a lot of social media. We even put posters at bus stops and on the sides of buses. One was to promote our name, but more importantly were the faces that were represented in the campaign. And those faces, as they toured the city at different spots, helped individuals who were walking down the street to say, that could be me.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't see themselves out there on there, then they were less likely to think that they could do it. This was a way to help others begin to say, yes, I can do that. Yeah. So
good idea. Yeah, very good. So I know this is probably a question that we'd all like answered. And we want to see what you have to say. But as the leader, how do you get all the oars in the water and rowing at the same time?
Well, thanks, Renee, for that question. And I just want to share with you, when I moved to Massachusetts, my husband introduced me to crew. I didn't know what that was. And so I learned to row on the Charles and understood exactly what it meant to have all oars in the water at the same time and also pulling at the same intensity if you were going to make the boat move and hopefully not flip over. That was the other possibility that was there. So for me, it's been focused on a couple of very fundamental things. I believe that transparency and communication are important. I think sharing of information is hugely important for people to understand actions. You know, I know I'm not make everybody happy with every decision, but I think people are better able to follow the decision, support the decision, even if it's not personally something they would agree to. They understand the reason why. And so I think that's huge to keeping the oars in the water at the same time. You know, and COVID made that very difficult. We lost the opportunity to connect people in the hallways, in the classroom, in other social events that we might have held on campus. So, I mean, as we got more comfortable with Zoom, that helped. But we strove to do it also to help keep those linkages going by adding what we call community meetings. Everybody's in, no agenda really. Anything goes in the meeting. And it was comprehensive, inclusive. No, I had IT and I had the all administrative assistants there, as well as the VPs. And then I did unit meetings so that you had smaller groups, because some don't like large crowds. But we added in not only those different levels, but frequency. I did those with students as well. Drop in, ask your questions, created links with our Student Government Association, so they got to know who their president was, and hear their concerns, hear their complaints as well. And then the most important thing for me about those meetings was I needed to have a response. Whatever came forward, I needed to close the loop on the issues they raised. Again, as I said, sometimes that solution wasn't going to meet everybody's need or personal perspective, but I would explain why and ask, and used other people to give me the input with that, and then went forward. So I think those have helped to keep people together as a team, to feel supported at the same time. It is about, again, so I said the communication, the transparency, that is what helps to build the trust. Not to say that I haven't had bumpy roads, don't get me wrong. There's always some loud voices in groups, but I think as you move forward with trying to keep those principles at the forefront, I think the outcome will be a positive one.
Agree. Yeah, trust is so important.
And I didn't flip the boat over either.
Good girl. There you go. That's why you're successful today in your leadership role. Rowing looks so much fun, but I know it's a lot of hard work. I will
tell you that I was 30 years old at the time. I was in the best physical shape I had ever been in my entire life when I was rowing.
I'm sure it's like it's a total body workout.
It is.
No stress on your knees. Courtney, did we want to go to Q&A or?
Yeah, we can definitely open it up to Q&A. I just dropped something in the chat. We can do it a couple different ways. So if you have a question, just try and use the raise hand function, just a little easier to see everyone. Or if you would rather stay on mute, you can drop it in the chat and I can read the question for you directly. So I'm gonna open it up. Does anyone wanna kick us off with a question? Okay. Well, I have a question for you. Sorry, Dr. Sue. So, we as a chamber have this large economic and community development plan, which you're learning obviously more about as you get more involved on the board. And what do you see as, obviously the workforce issue is a big part of that plan, and kind of the healthcare industry as a whole is a huge employer here in the region, and a huge industry. How are you looking to kind of get engaged in the region in that broader conversation? What can we do to kind of help support that effort?
I'm a firm believer in partnerships. I don't think anybody can do it on their own. I mean, maybe Elon Musk or, Gates, but I think the partnerships is the way in which we make our communities stronger and thereby make our own companies or institutions stronger as well. So, it's one of the reasons why I got interested in the chamber was I wanted to know who were the other groups of my community and what were they doing and how did they make a contribution. So, it's giving, and then there's, coming back and helping each other mutually support. So, one of the things, particularly in healthcare, is Labouré has reached out to other healthcare organizations to say, how can I help you in terms of your shortage needs and your staffing needs? What it's led back for me in that relationship is to develop other programs that are attracting students to my institution. It's helping me to strengthen what is the career pathway in healthcare for residents of the South Shore and the greater Boston area. And that goes back to then helping and providing qualified individuals for the healthcare businesses and industries in the South Shore. So it's a mutual relationship where, we all benefit. And that's what I think in the long run will be the economic benefit. The other thing that for me triggers a comment is, when I came on board at Labouré, I realized that we had a recognition problem, that people didn't know who Labouré was, except for, the tight knit group of nursing leaders and clinical, managers and so forth who had worked with our students over the 100+ years we've been around. But beyond that, in terms of industry or other types of healthcare, they didn't know we were there. And I may have told the story to Renee, but I think it was within the first month, and I'm down in East Milton Square and I'm going to get a sandwich for lunch. And I run into a young woman and we start chatting, and she says, well, where do you work? I said, oh, I work at Labouré. She goes, oh, where's that? I'm a mile down the street from you. And so that went like, oh, I said, this is a problem. We got to do something. And so we launched on that campaign, as I shared with you earlier. I think that's also what South Shore Chamber is doing, to help promote through visibility campaign, all the different kinds of industries, small, large, medium size, and what they do to support. I think most individuals prefer to do whatever business it is, whatever needs they have, they want to fulfill it locally. And that's where the chamber can be so beneficial to all the residents. And for me personally, I'm thinking about ways in which I can help promote some of the businesses that aren't healthcare even. I thought about the new restaurant, for example, that's the grill and one of the new restaurants that you're promoting as an event. Well, I need to promote that to my faculty and staff who live in and around this area. We all like to eat and socialize. And, getting them to know those different things. Again, how do we make those different crisscrossing connections? So that's my
Response.
challenge, if you will. But
Thank you. Thank you
Right.
very much. George, do you want to go next? And then Peter, you can take the final word.
Definitely don't want to follow Peter. Good morning, everybody. Very nice, great conversation. Love listening to it. It was fantastic. A couple of things. One, welcome to the chamber. And I think you already know this because Renee is the best, but what you have now open to you is kind of what you were talking about, a support, a partnership. You can pick up the phone and call any one of us, and we all have the same problems, concerns, and you really have a huge support group here. It's really important. So I heard you talk a lot about recruiting people and students and things like that. I'm looking at the other side because as we all talk, we're all looking for help. What are you doing on the placement side Is there anything we can do to help you place students? Do you have, because you want your students to be successful and get out there and get experience. Maybe there's something the chamber and this network can help you with. And again, thank you. That was a really nice talk this morning.
Well, thank you so much, George. And I would like, I'm not sure I know what all the opportunities are for placement. And I would love to have that conversation with interested members of the chamber about that. So we do post positions through our student affairs office, both part-time and full-time positions. I will tell you that typically, because of the students' clinical rotations that they do as part of their requirements, that usually is where the first place they think about getting a job. So we don't have we historically have never had a really large career service or placement center because of how healthcare is structured. And so that has been something. I was sharing earlier with Renee, though, we are in discussions right now with a large healthcare organization right now who's looking at providing loan forgiveness or loan repayment type of program for our graduates in nursing. And if hopefully, my fingers are crossed, this gets announced very shortly, but it's another way in which to recruit, I think, potentially. We've been hearing about bonuses. We've also heard about the plethora now of traveling nurses.
Mhm.
This is like a Band-Aid on, a huge wound. That it's never going to solve the problem and actually make things worse. So I think placement is incentives, or how do we do that, needs to be a conversation. And I would support that.
That's great. Maybe we could put together a healthcare group and just have sort of a little session with the chamber healthcare. There's so many of us now on the chamber that we could get together and talk about that.
I think that would be great, Renee.
And
There you
Renee,
go,
it's-
Peter. There's something for you to do.
Renee, it's Cindy, and I didn't want to cut Peter short, but I'm happy to help wherever I can. But Peter Grape and Lily, you may have already spoken with my colleague, Peter Grape, who is part of Mass General Brigham Harbor Medical down on the South Shore. But if I can be a resource, happy to be so.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Okay, Peter Foreman, you're up.
Thanks, Lily, and thanks for serving on our board. Following up on the workforce issue, one of the things that often comes up with our members in leadership is the chamber trying to help with professional development around soft skills, which I interpret to be mostly interpersonal, and then take as communication. And people translate that into have more events so you can stick out your hand and say hello and talk to people and exchange a business card. But I want to circle back to something you said earlier, that you found during COVID that the remote work actually helped with communications. Did I hear that correctly? And why? What would it have been about the remote or the virtual training that helped with communications in a way that personal interaction would not?
I would never say that remote is as good as or better than personal interaction. But I will say it can be effective. And there are ways in which to make it such that you feel you achieved whatever goal it was. Now, the example that comes to mind for me is when maybe Facebook first came out, and we found that grandparents were a huge user of Facebook because all the pictures of their grandchildren that went on Facebook that was not an outcome I don't think that anybody anticipated. So what remote learning did for us, I think, as a silver lining aspect, is it gave us a comfort level about how to use the technology and then how to connect and be effective in that way. We know it's also tends to be more effective when I've had some face-to-face, but I can tell you, I have students who have never seen each other. I have faculty from 20 different states in this over the country who are on my payroll, who never come to campus, because we do offer fully online courses. But they feel very connected to their students, and I get comments from the students that they enjoy that faculty member immensely. So what I can do is to help make the technology part less of a burden, less of an intimidation factor, and let the human part come through on the screen. So that's for me the trick. I'm right now thinking about how does Labouré respond to the whole telehealth. Telehealth is here and it's going to expand in healthcare no matter what our opinion is. And I think we need to recognize that. There are benefits and there are also challenges with it, just like everything else. And the change will be difficult. But we cannot deny that there are advantages and that we should capitalize on them because it means better patient outcome. It means that mother who has a colicky baby at 2 a.m. has a resource to go and talk to somebody face-to-face, not just on the phone, to help solve her issue with that colicky baby. Now, if anybody has ever had a colicky baby, you know exactly the pain I'm talking about. So or let's talk about the elderly parent who maybe is diabetic, has got some skin issues, and there's a home health aide or nurse coming in who does checks with that patient, has an iPad, who can talk directly with the nurse practitioner or the physician, show pictures of the skin so that the immediate understanding of how serious the condition is can happen without having to get that person in the car because he or she doesn't want to go to the doctor's office. Takes 3 times the amount of time. And let's not even factor in the cost. But I can get a better outcome with just that simple piece of technology. So it's the technology is the tool. It's not the quality of the interaction or treatment. And I think that's part of what we need to get people past. And I am the first to admit, I am not technologically oriented. When somebody says, oh, it's just intuitive, I cringe because I know I'm going to have a problem. So I know that there are those kinds of, and I would classify them, Peter, as some soft skills. For many of our generation, we need, and other generations, it's not just about, we get comfortable with a certain kind of way in which we use technology, but there's a whole bunch of different ways, but the fact that it's here and it's not going away, that's what we need to accept and deal with. And so, one of the things that we're working on right now is, what do I need my future nurses? My students need to know about telehealth. How can they be better as a nurse, as a clinician, using technology? I don't know if I answered your question exactly, Peter, so you can redirect.
You didn't. No, you didn't answer it directly, but the question wasn't direct because I was fishing for an answer. I wasn't sure what it was. So you took me down an area I wasn't thinking, which is fine. So I appreciate that because we're trying to figure this out. Events like this, 2 years ago would have all been in person. We found during COVID that our virtual meetings and events actually hit different segments of our membership. because people either weren't comfortable or weren't physically able, or it wasn't physically convenient for people to convene in person, but they were taking advantage of things like this. So we found interesting hitting different segment of the membership. So we're serving our members in a different way, or serving some of our members in a different way. But then we'll hear from some others, gee, I have to meet in person. We have to keep doing in person, which leads to the whole discussion of how do you mix the two? Is everything hybrid, or do you do some programs that are only in person and some that are virtual, all to help engage people and give them the chance to network and learn from one another?
I think the answer is that there's no one size that fits all. Because we're struggling a little bit with that same question, Peter. And I think there are some things where they can be hybrid, a mix and match. And then some things that the chamber may want to keep. This is just one grouping of things that we're always going to do face-to-face. Because one, it's where our members feel it's most effective. It's most meeting the needs. And that's okay. So this may not be a good example in terms of the chamber's needs, but we're going to have commencement this year in person. It's the first time in 3 years. We did virtual commencement the last two. So the last two classes have been invited back, even though they're graduated, so they can have the experience. But that's one thing that, if I don't have to do it online or remotely, I'm always going to do it face-to-face because of the meaning and the experience. I haven't thought of, my team hasn't thought of how we can, replicate that experience in a Zoom fashion. And we tried the last 2 years, but, we recognize that there were certain limitations. So I think there may be those things where, the chamber may say, no, this is always going to be this way, a certain thing. But I will tell you personally, professionally for me, if it weren't for Zoom, I would have not been able to attend or participate in as many meetings, gotten to know as many people and organizations.
Good.
So I hope some Zoom continues.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
But we are going to have in-person board meetings. You have to show up.
Okay, Peter.
I don't care what my board is telling me, we're going to do it.
Removed. Just kidding. All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Sue. Thank you, Renee. I think we had a really nice discussion this morning. It was really great to get to know Dr. Sue better, and I'm excited to have you on the board and to get to work with you over these next few years. Thank you to everyone who joined us this morning for this session. Again, I will send the recording to all registered attendees. And just as a quick closeout, I just want to again thank our sponsors, Enbridge, George Washington, Toma TV and Appliance, Hollywood Agency, Mass General Brigham, Mountain One Bank, Partnering for Performance, and Steinberg HR. We're very grateful for your support of our Women in Local Leadership series. And again, very grateful to have both of you with us today. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Lily.
you.
I'll be in
Thank you
touch
so much.
soon. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.